Please be seated. I'd like to talk to you today about the Scriptures. Our Gospel is telling us the story of the feeding of the multitude. Each of the four Gospels has an account of these events. In Mark, there are two different accounts of the feeding of the multitudes. In Luke, they only counted the men at 5,000, which would have meant there had to have been 2 to 3 times that number of people there, because 5,000 men in the wilderness wasn't a multitude. It was an army. In some amount, the amount of money needed to buy the food was mentioned, like in today. In others, it was not. In John's version today, we see it was a test for Philip. And then it was near the Passover. Each version was written to a distinct audience and was trying to portray a specific message about who Jesus was. Now, I think it's important to emphasize here that although in the next part of John's Gospel, Jesus appears to walk on water, the feeding of the 5,000 was not about Jesus creating something from nothing, or even magically transforming 5 loaves and 2 fish into a banquet that could feed thousands. No, this was the type of behavior that Jesus rejected. John never mentioned Jesus being tempted by the devil in the desert after his baptism like in the other Gospels. Yet when the people saw or thought that he had transformed the food himself, they were going to make him king. And so he withdrew into the wilderness. Just like in the story of Jesus in the desert, when the tempter urged Jesus to turn the stones into bread, he refused. Jesus' ministry wasn't about him. God is about empowering us. God doesn't need the power. When we act in accordance with God's love and grace, miracles happen. God acts through our response to God's call. The miracle is in our response to God's grace. When we are called and we act, that is the miracle. There is enough for all, although we think there is not. There is grace and love for all. People do not live by bread alone, although the hungry cannot hear that. When we look around at the miracle of this web of life around us, when we see that the sun shines and its energy is transformed into something we can eat, when we respond to hunger from those around us, a welcome table is set, as in today's scripture. You know, as an aside, I'd like to mention here something about the phenomenon of giving. People respond so much more to individuals who are in need rather than to a vague notion of the poor or the hungry. When we see someone without a coat or without food, we generally will share. But when it's abstracted just a little bit, we balk. We'll feed someone fish for a day when they are hungry before us, but we'll demand that they be taught how to fish themselves when asked to help them when we cannot see them. Now, this is not everyone, but it seems to be a pattern. We tend to help those right in front of us and have a harder time helping someone far away. But it's why perhaps we give more in response to disasters. For example, we were very generous in giving to the people in Haiti after the earthquake when they suffered so much. But they were starving before the earthquake, and we weren't opening our pockets. We were responding to a direct need rather than a general call. Yes, we as people respond to the call when we see it. In today's story, the need was all around. The free offering of a boy who would give up his daily food Something his mother probably packed for him before she sent him off to follow the crowds. When he heard the boy heard that people needed to be fed, he gave. It was like the sun and the rain of spring calling for the plants around them to grow. The potential for sharing was and always is there. It's just sometimes we need help from someone else to see it. And you know a leader who could inspire people to share from their meager stores in the wilderness is the type of leader who actually would truly make a good king. But that's not why Jesus came. That's not why the miracle takes place. He doesn't take credit for the mercy which God bestowed, for the generosity which God continues to show. And that generosity is the message of all the Scriptures. The Scriptures are about our interaction with God, how we enact God's grace in the world, how blessings flow so freely, and what can be done with that. Thousands can be fed where seemingly there is not enough. Yet the Scriptures are written by man. Yes, they were all written by only men. And yes, they were about men too. They're really not about God. They're about us. They're about the people and how they responded to Jesus. And as we see Jesus' divinity, the story is about how we reacted to that divinity. The Scriptures are about very human beings. And our first reading is an excellent example of that. One of the most human stories in the Bible. Now, my mother told me a story about when she was growing up as a teenage daughter of Christian missionaries in India. She told me how her friends went to their parents and her parents paid them to read the Bible. Not very much because it was a lot of years ago, but her teenage friends were paid by their parents to read the Bible. So she went to her mother and said, "Hey, can you pay me? I'll read the Bible." And her mother said, "No, the Bible's too racy for you. It's too racy for children to read." Mostly because of the story, like we heard today. And my mother, of course, went right to the family library, pulled out one of the many Bibles that's there, and read it very carefully to find all the racy parts. And as a result, read the Bible without getting paid. Yes, the Scriptures are about very human beings. And in today's story, the greatest king of the Jewish people, King David, ruled over the largest kingdom of Israel, in Judea. The king from whom Jesus purports to have descended. David, in essence, was a peeping Tom, lusting after somebody else's wife. David, the man and king, who used his position to sexually harass the wife of a subordinate, and then who had that husband killed. This man went on to father 4 sons through Bathsheba. One of them, Solomon, was the progenitor or the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather of Joseph. And Nathan was the progenitor of Mary, according to Matthew and to Luke. King David was not the best of fathers, but yet he was the continuation of the branch of Jesse's tree, which would end up becoming the Christ. And what the Spirit is saying to God's people in this story, the human message in the Scripture is that you never know what will spring from our frailties. Time and time again, our frailties and failings are seen to bear fruit that we could never even imagine. But this messy thing called life holds no end of surprises for us. That the greatest of kings has very human feet and still walks in the gutter from time to time. We are no different, any one of us, when we allow ourselves to be in the smallest way humble and see how alike we truly all are. We are the crowds, looking for someone to magically give us our daily bread rather than share with each other. We seem to want to set our leaders up on pedestals to elevate celebrities, sports heroes, even sometimes politicians, to be somehow different than us. We hold them to a different standard. And in doing that, we deny the miracle that is in us and our interactions with each other. I experience God when you all share it, or when I share it with you. It doesn't come to me out of nothingness, but always in my interaction with the world. David slipped in his actions, and in the isolation of his own, not in the isolation of his own thoughts, but in his acting out from those thoughts. The people were fed in the crowd, not from some magic baskets, but from each other. The scriptures are windows, stories of our interactions with God. And today, there were a lot of people interacting with God in the wilderness. The people usually don't find food to eat. The scriptures are our loaves and fishes when we share them with each other. When we read them, looking for the subtle meanings together, we're blessed. We don't need a king, a flawed human king, to feed us. God's grace will provide in ways we never thought possible. The scriptures remind us that God has been in our lives since before the beginning and will